From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is RoadSigns. And now here's your host, Michael Fries.
Thank you for listening to RoadSigns, a podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. In this episode, we ask the following question: what can the trucking industry do to include more diversity? We'll set out to answer that question and explore the subject of diversity and entrepreneurship with Demarco Thomas, managing partner of Metromax Group, later in the program. But first, we'll dive into the area of recruitment and retention with our first guest, Rob Reich, Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer at Schneidernational. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on today.
Glad to have you on. One of the reasons we wanted to have you on was just to talk about diversity, but in the sense of bringing more people of color into the trucking industry. As you probably know, for CDL drivers, about 23% of the workforce is, under 23% of the workforce is Hispanic, 17% Black, and 4% Asian. In those terms, in those numbers, what are you doing at Schneider to get more people involved into the trucking industry? Not so much in driver roles, but also in leadership roles as well.
Sure. Across the board. Yeah, Mike, we're really committed to ensuring that we cast a broad net for talent and to your question, and improve diversity, both within the organization, and we like to see it improved throughout the entire industry. We feel really good on the driver side, actually, and the numbers you cited for drivers. One of our goals is to reflect the communities in which we operate, and I think we've done pretty well with the driver community from an ethnicity standpoint. But I think the key there is to make sure you get your message out about the type of jobs that you have to offer, and that you're not overlooking certain networks of people. And so that's a key part of our recruiting effort, is to assess, hey, is our message and our marketing and recruiting efforts accessible, and can we get in front of audiences that we're interested in hiring? And so that's really one of the first places we look, is just ensuring that we're, again, casting a broad net. So, for example, we know some people prefer to speak in their native language initially when they're talking about a job. So we have Spanish-speaking recruiters in our recruiter department. So a variety of things there, just to make sure that we're reaching out and assessing our abilities to get in front of a variety of audiences.
When you say, correct me if I'm wrong, where you're going to where those communities are to promote interest into the industry, what are some of the things you're doing specifically? I mean, is it just kind of? I mean, are you going to schools, or you're going to certain communities, just kind of promoting the awareness of the industry? I mean, what sort of things are you doing?
Yeah, it's a little more focused on our specific needs for the most part. On the driver's side, we have a large field recruiting team that's located throughout the country. And so we think that's an important element of our recruiting plan, because you have people operating in the local communities who understand the community and know where to go to talk to people. So a big focus of ours, of course, is hiring somebody that is graduating from truck driving school. And so that's one of the reasons we have those field recruiters, is to make sure that they understand what are those schools in their area. How do we work with the schools to promote what they're offering and bring people into those schools that eventually are interested in driving, and hopefully driving for Schneider? On a more broad enterprise perspective, it's really, for example, ensuring that we have a very good campus recruiting program for college graduates. And so we've identified a variety of schools across the country, Mike, and particular focus recently on schools that are able to provide that diverse audience and a diverse student population that we know we're going to see a variety of folks, as we prefer to see. And so we've identified schools that we know, and this is education backgrounds and ethnicity and male, female, you name it. We want to make sure we're, again, casting that theme of casting that broad net. So, for example, we've added recently a recruiter in our campus recruiting team who's very focused on our diversity recruiting efforts. And we've added some schools to our campus recruiting list that provide a diverse student population, to include some historically Black colleges and universities, for example.
It's interesting that you had mentioned HBCUs and the programs that you're getting into to generate interest and involvement into the industry. What are some of the things in talking to the schools that you have found to be beneficial in trying to get a more diverse workforce?
I think it's getting involved. Some of it, Mike, is getting involved in the majors that might align themselves with our type of work. So there's some great supply chain and logistics programs out there, for example. But do the students in those programs understand the variety of opportunities that exist within the supply chain industry? And they may not think, for example, about Schneider. They might think, well, they hire drivers. They have no idea that we have a huge logistics business, that we have a staff of mechanical engineers that work here, and all the variety of jobs that we have. And so that's what we hear from the schools is, hey, you really got to make sure you're telling your story. And we've got this strong value proposition for folks that they just simply may not be aware of. And so that whole awareness campaign and the ability to work with the school to enable us to get in front of students is really important.
From time to time, an issue commands so much of the industry's attention that it requires a deeper dive, a resource readers can turn to, a transport topic special report. We're turning our attention to another big issue, electrification and the key factors that will drive this industry trend. In every case, we're working to provide our readers with information, analysis, and clarity on key issues confronting fleets. One comprehensive resource packed with insights that can give you the edge. Transport Topics invites you to learn more about our special reports. To reserve your copy of the latest special report, visit ttn.ws/electrification.
I just kind of want to get into this next subject since we kind of segued into it just slightly. I want to talk about more with the Schneider Foundation
Mhm.
and the grant program, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion grant programs that you have. Could you just tell me the origins of it and the meaning behind it?
Yeah, so really started in the middle of last year, in the middle of 2020, after honestly some of the social unrest in the country. Our CEO, Mark Rourke, sent a message out to the organization just talking about, hey, we want to be a leader in diversity, equality, and inclusion, and we want to get feedback from folks, and we want to enable folks to have an impact. And so, as we got some feedback, Mark put some listening sessions together. Our executive team got together and talked about some ideas. We said, let's do something that enables our associates, Schneider associates, at the local level to get involved in ways that they're interested in getting involved to improve diversity and to improve social justice in their homes, in their hometowns. So we said, well, in order to enable some of that, you need some funding. And so we put $250,000 aside and we asked our associates, either at our headquarters in Green Bay or again at any of our locations throughout the country, to come up with suggestions and really what amounts to grant proposals of, hey, here's something that I'd like to get involved with or our team would like to get involved with locally to have a positive impact as it relates to diversity. And so that's what we wanted to fund, and that's really where that origin came from. Is we want to have an impact, but we want to enable our associates to have that local impact, and that requires some money behind it.
In learning about this, I see that the programs that you do get involved in through the grant program really appreciate that particular help. What type of positive feedback have you gotten from those groups that you've impacted?
Absolutely, Mike. I think you look at nonprofits, and there's two things that they always need. They need volunteers to put time against it, and they need funding to support their programs. And they really need both. And I think that's some of the feedback that we've gotten through this program is we try to put it together. So this is more than just writing a check, right? We didn't want to just get a suggestion, hey, here's a great organization to donate some money to, but we really wanted these grants to be tied to our associates either already being engaged in a nonprofit or getting engaged with that nonprofit. And that's some of the feedback we've gotten is just the appreciation for the local interest and the local time put against it in addition to the funding. So for example, you look, one of the really cool programs is a mentorship program of young African American boys down in Dallas. Well, we have some of our folks who are those mentors. And now we've got some funding along with that to support that program. So I think that's where we've really heard some positives is the combination of the individual involvement as well as some of the funding.
We've talked a lot about the recruitment side of things and getting more people of color into the workforce. Let's bring our attention to the retention aspect of this. You had mentioned earlier about meeting people where they're at and having someone especially in the Hispanic community, having someone speaking a Spanish speaking associate to get people into the work fold. What are some of the things that you're doing for a more diverse work group uh, to keep them involved in not just in Schneider, but into a career in trucking? Or are there some programs or some initiatives that you have to keep them in the fold?
Absolutely. Well, it's one of the reasons we think our leadership positions should also reflect the community in which we work in, right? And so again, I mentioned we feel great about our drivers. We still have some opportunity to improve some of our diversity in our leadership ranks, and we think it's important for people as they look at those careers. Hey, they see people with similar backgrounds. They see people who they can associate with. Of, well, look what that guy did. That's really cool. Maybe I can do that. And so we want to make sure that, again, part of that's recruiting the right people, but then it's also having the development processes and the training that folks need to have that good career, and also to make sure that people can appreciate the different needs of the different communities in which we're working. And so we've done some education, for example, on unconscious bias, and so to make sure that, hey, nowhere are we making decisions that perhaps there's some unconscious bias. Could we be better from diversity if we identified what some of those unconscious biases are and ensured that they weren't influencing the things that we do. We do a variety of development opportunities, Mike. So, for example, in our maintenance organization, which is a very diverse organization, every year we have a high potential technician program where we're identifying high potential technicians at all of our shops around the country. And we have a great program where usually 20 to 25 members each year get an opportunity for some additional training, for some additional exposures to leaders throughout the organization. Again, to make sure that they see what those opportunities are and they know that that development path exists for them.
One of the things that I see that Schneider is doing a lot to include more people of color in the industry. And you had spoken earlier about bringing people in, and you touched upon that during your answers in this interview. And that's just one of the general things that I've seen in talking to executives in the industry, where I mean, to get more people of color, you got to meet them where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And Rob, I'm just going to ask you to put on your analyst hat
Sure.
and just kind of give us your general take on diversity. You explained what Schneider is doing to bring people in and to retain that particular talent. What are some of the things that the industry must do to get more people interested in a career in logistics and trucking?
Well, I think, promoting the positive aspects of the work that surprise people, Mike, I think is always one of the things to think about. And so, if you talk about driving careers or technician careers, I think people still have very old-fashioned perspectives of what our jobs provide. Think about a technician in one of our shops today. I mean, they're working on some really cool new technology. The primary tool in the shops these days is a laptop. So it's not that dirty job that it used to be. There's still some dirt, but it's not what people think a mechanic used to do. Well, we got to tell people that. From a driving perspective, think of how great the technology is in the trucks are these days with automated manual transmissions, and collision mitigation systems. It's a very different experience driving a truck than somebody's perspective of what that experience is. And so I think the more we can help people understand how different the job might be than what they think it is, the better off we are. And then it's the rest of the value proposition of the job. The fact that both of those jobs pay pretty well. There's career progression opportunities. And so it's really just, I think we have to do a better job of letting people know we've got good options for them and they might not be considering yet.
Rob, it was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
In times like these, it's crucial to stay informed. Transport Topics is offering all the information you need to make business decisions in these unprecedented times. And in the wake of the many event cancellations and group gatherings, TT ensures a virtual way to consume business content and conversation. To join the conversation and stay ahead of the news, follow Transport Topics on all social outlets or by visiting ttn.ws/stay informed.
Next on the program, we'll speak to Demarco Thomas, managing partner of Metromax Group. Welcome to the show, Demarco.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Pleasure being here.
Thank you. Very thankful to have you on. One of the things, before we kind of get into the 10,000 foot view of diversity, I just want to know your story. How did you get into the trucking industry? And also, what road led you to start up Metromax Group?
Sure. So, my core background is corporate finance. I worked in corporate finance based out of Atlanta, Georgia, for a number of years. And in 2016, I had a friend childhood friend, who was a truck driver and convinced me to invest in his first semi. So I made that investment. I did pretty well in the over-road trucking space from 16 to 2018, scaled from 1 unit to 20 units. And it just opened my eyes, and I kind of fell in love with the transportation space. And between 2016 to date, we've made various investments in transportation, from the asset side, uh, over the road trucking, last mile delivery, and the trailer leasing business, to the services side, back office support, tech development, and dispatching. So overall, it's been a phenomenal growth over the last 5 years, and I just fell into it and fell in love with it.
It sounds like you just have an encompassing reach when it comes to trucking, business wise. You mentioned that you were in love with it. What are some of the aspects that you love about it?
I love that it has opportunities. It's very fragmented. Not a lot of technology disruption is taking place in transportation, and overall, it's a low barrier to entry. When I got into it, those three traits really attracted me, and also the people. I've met some great people in transportation, on a personal level and on a business level, and so just overall, it's kind of just fell into my wheelhouse, and I jumped on the bike, and I'm riding, and I'm enjoying it.
What were some of the pain points that you saw in the industry that led you to find Metromax Group?
Couple. When I first got into semi business, the over the road trucking business, the biggest point I found was dispatching. It was hard to get consistent quality freight, and it was hard to get the talent in order to deliver that freight or manage the delivery of that freight at a cost effective manner. So I used a lot of my corporate experience to actually travel to India, establish a dispatch office, Metromax Dispatch, dispatch my company from offshore, because trucking margins are slim, right? They're pretty slim. And so, I couldn't hire a real sophisticated staff in the US and at the same time scale my business, not as a small company. But by leveraging outsourcing, I did it for myself. And I also started to offer that as a service, and quickly grew a client base of over 150 trucks in less than an 18-month time frame. So that's one example. And from there, I just started to crack the code on little things like trailers. Trailers are pretty hard to get for new owner operators. And having a dispatch company, I gained access to a lot of new owner operators. And their problem was my problem. If they couldn't get trailers, then I couldn't necessarily get trailer freight in order to support them. So I had to solve that. And we started a trailer leasing company to support them. And from there, last mile delivery. So we decided to get in that space with Amazon as a delivery service partner, as well as just expanding out our back office support, being that we have a solution center in India, everything from track and trace to BOL to accounting to marketing. We've decided to really become a one-stop shop for a front-facing transportation entity, specifically in the small and medium transportation space, which tends to be underserved and overlooked, and don't have a lot of solutions.
Well, it's safe to say that you've had some success in your business venture. What other entities comprise Metromax Group? You had mentioned the dispatch. What other areas is the group a part of?
So there's Metro Max Dispatch, um, which is my dispatching arm that support primarily owner operators and fleets under 100 units. There's Metro Max Solutions, which is my back office support company that provide business process outsourcing support to transportation companies in various forms. As I mentioned, marketing, accounting, track and trace, host of things. There's Metro Max Express, which is my partnership with Amazon. There's Partum Express, which is my last mile delivery partnership with Lasership. There's New Fleet Leasing, which is my trailer leasing entity. And lastly, there's Fleet Carrier Services, which is a company we launched maybe about 60 days ago that specializes in compliance and permitting. And we're taking a different spin to that, where we introducing technology as far as a pretty slick portal, as well as using our back office support team to make sure that the cost is minimized to transportation companies. So, got a couple different hats we wear, but the beauty of it is it's a team environment, and we have leadership in each one of those companies that drives it on a day-to-day basis, and pretty much make me look good.
One of the things I know you've noticed is that there aren't too many people of color in the industry, just per se, through drivers, but the number is even smaller when it comes to the executive position and the ownership of a trucking company. What were some of your takeaways of just kind of getting into the business, number one, as a person of color, and being in a leadership position and an entrepreneurship position? What takeaways did you get from that?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that you're looked up to among a lot of minorities who are at positions that are non-executive, right? And that you're rare, which I don't think should be the case. I think that the minority culture is kind of challenged in a couple ways. First way is really to access the capital. We haven't been educated properly to have those venture capital discussions to grow a business. Most of our endeavors, we bootstrap, right? Or we use credit cards, or we use some kind of high interest vehicle that doesn't allow us to be profitable quick enough in order to reinvest and grow our business. Second thing I would say is the identification of mentors. When you're a minority in the trucking space, as you mentioned, I think about 40% of people in trucking are minorities. But when it comes to the executive level, man, it may be in the single digits, right? And so identifying mentors who come from your background, who understand, some of the challenges you may have, it's kind of hard to find in the transportation space. And the last thing is just getting in the room. You can have the talent, you can have the access to capital potentially, but just having the opportunity to get in the room and present yourself and what your capabilities are and what your company can do, I think is a little bit more challenging on the minority side.
In what ways would it be challenging, or just there's lots of barriers. I mean, no matter who you are in the industry, but what unique barriers have you come across, or are there in the industry?
Well, I think the biggest thing I have as far as a challenge was just not knowing, right? Not knowing the associations that are in trucking, not knowing how to get introduced to them. It was just a lack of knowledge, right? Coming from the corporate background, I learned how to research pretty intensively. And even when I first got into trucking in 2016, with my research abilities, I struggled to find, okay, what resources can I tap into in order to, coach and mold me and help me get into the next level. So I think it's a combination of not knowing, but also, mentorship. Like, I think that's the key factor. There's not a lot of programs, at least when I initially got into trucking, that try to help minorities get into the business and grow into an exec, right? There's a lot of programs that want to help us be employees, but as far as taking us through a leadership program and, putting us at the right tables. That's far and few, in my opinion. Now, circumstances are starting to change over the last, year or so due to Black Lives Matter and things of that nature, but still a long way to go, right? And I'm excited about it, and I'm proud of the companies that have embraced it so far.
Have there been particular things that you have done to get more people of color involved in the trucking industry, and more specifically in the leadership?
Definitely. So, I do it from an employee standpoint. I employ about 105 people currently in Atlanta, and I employ about 80 people outside of Atlanta, in India, my back office support team. And across both companies, the managers are minorities. They had no prior transportation experience. I literally hired them based on, certain skill sets like customer service, passion, tech background, and I taught them transportation. Simply because, I didn't see too many candidates, of my background that I could pick from in transportation. But also I wanted to make sure that the company represented me, and it represented kind of the fact that as a minority, your company can still be very successful. It still could be multifaceted, and it could offer opportunities. So I intentionally tried to cater to the underserved community when I built Metro Max Group.
Okay. The one of the things that intrigued me when I first met you was just the business model that you have. When it comes to the Metromax Group, like I said earlier, you have a pretty extensive reach in the trucking industry, functioning all assets. And doing it as a African American, that's an accomplishment as well. What advice would you have for other people of color who are choosing to go into the trucking industry and taking on a leadership role? What's one of the first things that they should take into account?
I think they want to take into account education, really identifying what niche you want to go into based on a problem, educating yourself about it, and then becoming an expert in that space. And if you can't be an expert, finding one and hiring one, right? The second thing I would say is team development. Most minority entrepreneurs, they feel like I'm gonna start a business based around me, centered on my image, with me touching everything. And we have to embrace the fact that we can't do everything, be everywhere, and we need a team, right? I went and got a team offshore because I couldn't afford a team locally, right? Just being honest. And so we got to open our mind to out of the box solutions in order to get us to the position we want to be in as we build in our company.
Demarco, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Have a good one.
Did you know you can ask Alexa to open Transport Topics? In just 1 minute, you will hear the biggest trucking headlines of that day. Be prepared and start your morning off right with Transport Topics.
Before we close, let's take a moment to revisit our original question. What can the trucking industry do to include more diversity? This short question garners a multi-tiered answer, as we heard from our guest this episode. In one way, fleets like Schneidernational are still working to implement procedures to find, entice, and keep their talent, and have committed to meet people of color in their communities. These companies have also invested the time to create lanes of communication and opportunity to better nurture that relationship. And the other way they approach this, from the example of entrepreneurs like Demarco Thomas, is that if people of color aren't finding that lane, they're making their own, blazing a path to create their own opportunities, while helping others to find theirs in the trucking industry. But this is, by no means, a victory lap. While there has been progress and mindsets have been shifted, there's still work to be done. If you enjoyed this episode of RoadSigns, please let others know. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. If my questions have sparked questions of your own, share them with the RoadSigns team, or reach me on Twitter at Michael V. Freeze. You can email us at share@ttnews.com. We'll read them and respond daily. And of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode of RoadSigns. Until then, I'm Michael Freeze. Thank you for listening.